From the time I was young, it actually started when I was about 5 years old, and I saw my mother grieving the loss of our beloved dog Teddy. And I knew that my mother was strong. She was mostly by herself. My father was a police officer, so he was working much of the time. When I was 5 years old, I had two baby brothers, and we had this wonderful dog. And when the dog was sick, and the dog catcher had to come and pick him up and take him away, I thought he was coming back. My mother knew he was not, that he would die. So I saw this strong ideal of my mother along with her crying and weeping, terribly upset. And I knew then that I wanted to comfort her because there was something happening besides with her, besides the mother that I was used to seeing, busy and doing everything and being happy and singing. And I knew that I wanted to help people in whatever way they needed me. And as I got a little older, I noticed that my brothers, and I had 4 brothers by the time I was 10, my brothers would often be in an emotional reaction to something that happened to them, whether it was falling out of a tree or falling off their bicycle or whatever. So I knew that there was a connection between feelings and what happened physically. I didn't know how to express it, though, when I was young. Then I went into nursing, and when I was in nursing, I saw a lot that was happening with my patients. At first I was a pediatric nurse, and I saw that sometimes the children would be sad with what they were experiencing physically, and other times they would be able to bounce back and after being so ill. And it intrigued me. How was this body-mind connection working? And I started to investigate the subject of body-mind, and I knew that there was a creator. I had learned about God when I was young. We were a very Catholic family, so I had all of the Catholic tradition behind me. But I knew there was more. And I felt that I had to explore this. I had to explore so that I could understand the relationship between your body, your mind, your spirit, and your emotions. What animates us through life? What actually holds us together? What actually inspires us? I knew you could touch the body and take care of the body in certain ways, medically or surgically or with medication. But how do you touch the spirit? How do you help someone with their emotions? And it was all connected. I could see that. I couldn't prove it. And I also was experiencing at the same time something coming through my hands from the time I was a child that allowed me to be able to comfort people and they would feel better, whether it was my family members, my younger brothers, or a friend. And certainly my patients. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it was comforting to them. And I wanted to explore what was that. Intrinsically, I knew that it was from a spiritual realm. And I didn't know how to manage it or who to talk with about it. And because I was in nursing, there's a lot of physical work in nursing of holding people and moving people and caring for equipment and so on. And I injured my back moving a patient that was paralyzed. I did not want to have surgery, as I was told that I should have. I had been in the surgical operating room where they did back surgery. I just didn't think it was for me. And so even though I didn't believe in chiropractic, my father had been helped by a chiropractor in the town where we lived. And so I decided to go to this chiropractor because I didn't want surgery, and I was told if I didn't have surgery, I wouldn't be able to do nursing for the rest of my life, which was my love, so I didn't want to stop that. And it so happened that when I walked into this doctor's office, he immediately saw that I was a channel for this healing energy, as he called it. And he said that he had a meditation group that was meeting weekly. I was invited to come to that and talk with people who could understand what I was experiencing. So I did. I joined the group, and I learned a lot about meditation, body, mind, spirit, emotion connection, and healing energy. And that I was a channel for this healing energy to flow through me. It was coming from a divine source, God, the essence, the energy that is the creative power in the universe. And I learned that, excuse me, as I had suspected all along, that God, the concept of God, was so much larger than I had ever been allowed to know in the religion where I was raised very strictly. I felt that this was very right for me to explore and understand. And here I had a group of people now that were supporting me and helping me to understand further. So as I developed this ability with the help of this chiropractor, who also did energy healing and had led me to books written by Dolores Krieger, who was a registered nurse, who was talking about energy healing in her books, I started to practice more and more. And at first it was within the group of people that I was meditating with on a weekly basis. And then I started going to classes that were a distance from my home. But in those classes were people of like mind. So there was a time during this, there was an opportunity during this time for me to approach my father, who had a really severe skin condition called psoriasis on his arm. There was only at the time one medication that he was using that was available, and it wasn't helping him. His skin was flaky, it was red, it was scaly, it was very uncomfortable for him. And he was always picking at it. So I said, "Dad, will you let me help you?" And he said, "Oh, you mean that healing stuff? I don't believe in that crazy stuff." And I said, "Well, I can just show you what I do. And, just see, at least you'll be relaxed, Dad." "No, I won't be." He really gave me a hard time. Yet, he agreed. So I told him the process, and he was resistant. He was resistant to relaxing. He just wanted to sit up straight in a chair. And anyway, he allowed me to put hands on him. Now, as I was channeling this energy through me, I was the conduit. I was not the healer. I was just an open vessel, a conduit for this energy. And my intention was to help my father in whatever way he needed help. So my intention went to utilizing the energy for however he most needed it, which did not necessarily mean healing his skin, but perhaps healing whatever led to this condition. And there was the body, mind, emotion connection. So I did the session with him on his whole entire body, and he questioned that. "Well, it's just my arm. Why are you working on my whole body?" So I said, "Dad, because the energy flows to wherever it needs to in you." I tried to explain to him that sometimes there was a connection, excuse me, that we didn't understand between body and mind and emotion that could have at least, if not created this, at least inflamed it more and more every day. And he did not accept that explanation. And just to give you an example, it would be like, since it was on the skin, something that could be under your skin, emotionally, you're agitated about someone or something. And maybe because you're right-handed, it is affecting your hand or your arm. It seemed impossible to my dad to believe that, and that was okay. I just did what I knew to do. And so at the end of the session, when I could feel the energy dissipating, my dad looked at his arm and he said, "See, I told you it wasn't going to work," because it was still there. And I said, "Well, Dad, I would like to come back again if you would like me to." And he said, "No, I kind of felt relaxed, but no." Okay, I let it go. The next morning, I received a phone call from my dad, who was astounded that his arm was completely healed. There was no evidence of the psoriasis at all. And sometimes it takes energy, a while, to really work in the levels of the body, mind, spirit, emotion connection. I was not looking for a cure. I was looking for a healing, which means to make whole again. So my father was astonished, and I believe that happened because it proved to my father there was something to this mystery that his daughter was involved in that he didn't believe in. And it never returned. I went over to see him, and his skin was pink and soft and clear, like new skin had grown overnight. It feels like a vibration to me. It started out as feeling tingly, and then it would be warmth. Now, sometimes the energy as it was flowing through, I could feel it in my face. I could just feel it coming, as though it was coming through the top of my head. And there are energy centers that open up. We all have them. There are 7 major ones. They're called the chakras. And the chakras are aligned with the physiology of the body. So energy comes through from divine source through these chakras: crown chakra, brow chakra, or third eye chakra as it's often called, throat chakra, heart chakra, solar plexus chakra, sexual chakra, or sometimes it's called second chakra, because you start from the bottom, and then the root chakra, the base chakra. The chakras are between the front and back of the body, and they are energy centers that are open, they're spinning, they have color, they have a sound, they have a note, a musical note that relates to them. They are transmission centers for the energy to come through from divine source through us to continually to adjust our bodies, to help us to be healthy, to help us to be comfortable. When these chakras are blocked or they are misaligned in some way due to stress, illness, many things that happen, accidents, injuries, many things that happen in this life, on this physical plane, they can be helped to return to their normal state through allowing the energy to flow. So I can feel when I work with someone, the energy field is about anywhere between 2 and 8 inches from the physical body. I can literally feel that energy field. And I can feel it where someone may be blocked with the energy, or the energy is congested in that area, or there has been an accident or an injury in that area, or there's been an illness. I can feel that. I can feel a difference in the energy, almost a disruption. Sometimes there's too much energy, so the body will be radiating intense heat from that area. Or sometimes that part of the body is not getting enough energy, or that chakra is somehow distorted. And then I can feel like a reduction in the energy. This is just how I experience it. So my calling then is to utilize this energy in a very sacred way to help the person's energy field become more aligned. And I'm just reminding that person that I'm working with that they are in some ways out of balance, and the energy that I'm channeling through me to them is helping their energy fields to balance, helping their chakras to balance again.
The idea of auras, that we have energy fields around us, that's something that you can actually see?
Yes. I used to see it a lot more often than I do now because I was working with energy every single day with people. And now I'm not doing it every single day. But when I was working with energy every single day, I would see auras. For example, the colors that I would see around people were often reflective of their emotional being. So different colors mean different things. At the time when I first started seeing these colors, I didn't know what they meant. I just know that sometimes they were beautiful and clear. They were shimmering. They were always moving, shimmering like this around them. Sometimes I would see what appeared to me to be a being on the one shoulder of someone, as though there was an angelic presence or a spiritual presence helping me, helping that person. I would see that differently than an aura, but still see the aura. I remember in a class I was teaching one time, I was very distracted because there was a woman sitting in the center of the class. The class was full, and I was teaching meditation, and all of a sudden, I saw her aura, and at first it started small, and it started shimmering, and then it got larger and larger, and started covering the people around her. And it was the most beautiful shade of purple. It was a beautiful color. And I remember I stopped talking. I was so enamored by this. And one of my students said, "Are you okay? Are you okay, Jean?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And I didn't know whether to tell them what I had just seen. So I do see colors. Sometimes the colors of a person is ill, or a person is in emotional distress. I might see a color around them that's muddy, like a not clear at all, muddy color, a color that is dull. And I know that that person is, whatever that color would mean, which I found out later, was in some kind of distress that was showing up in their body as a dis-ease, but it was really coming from their emotional state.
How far out is normally, like how far out from the body would the color radiate? Like a foot out, inches out, or?
I have seen it a foot out. I've also seen it just maybe 6 inches out. I've also seen auras around trees and plants and animals, and not always in color, but this field of light, and the light vibrates, and it's very beautiful. It's unmistakable, really. And I learned how to focus my eyes to see the aura a little bit better. When I went into hospice nursing, I was free to help patients in whatever way I felt they could utilize my help the best. And I can talk about hospice later, but to answer your question, as I left hospice nursing because the hospice facility where I worked was closing, I went back to hospital nursing, and I thought that I could utilize the same healing energies that I did with my hospice patients with patients in the hospital. And it was not well received by administration. The patients loved it because it was to them a very relaxing feeling, a comforting feeling. And there was a time I was working at a famous hospital that was famous for heart issues. And there was a gentleman who was my patient who was going for quadruple bypass heart surgery the following morning. I was working midnight shift. And on the rounds, we had to go around every hour to make sure that the patients were okay. We had little flashlights. And the floor where I was working was very quiet. And as I was walking around checking on patients who were mostly sleeping, this one gentleman who was going for the surgery in the morning was very agitated and still awake. He had already had 2 Valium tablets to help him relax. They were not effective at all. So I decided I had the time, and I had the inclination and the guidance, actually, to sit with him. and help him to learn to breathe in a relaxed way. And then I asked him if I could just put hands on him, perhaps give him a back massage and neck massage to relax him more. And I said, now you might feel I'm going to just utilize a certain healing touch. And I explained it just a little bit to him. And he said, well, whatever you can do. I'm so nervous. I'm so upset about this surgery. So I did. I helped him to relax through energy healing while I was giving this massage on his neck and shoulders and his upper back. And he fell asleep. I could feel him relaxing, see him relaxing, and he fell asleep. When I left the room, other nurses had seen me in there, and they were very curious about what I was doing. So I tried to explain to them. And it so happened when I was explaining this to them that the supervisor came up. She did not like this at all. I was called down to the office the next day and told that I was not to do that any longer, that I should have given the patient another Valium. And I said, that's not what the patient needed. The patient needed someone to be there and comfort, and I could do it. I had the time. There was no one else that needed my attention. So some of the nurses in that hospital were a little curious and asked me further questions. And it turned out that in that hospital and in other hospitals that I had worked at later, there was a little group of nurses. And I would stay after my shift was over and just teach them things that I had learned and that I was doing. And pretty soon, I didn't feel that I was in a position to teach them the same methods so that they could be qualified to utilize it, but to help them to understand body, mind, spirit, emotion connection and how this energy could really help someone at least relax. And I taught them that it's called healing energy, but healing does not mean curing. And that's a very important difference. Sometimes it does.
You were really moved by the death of a young girl.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that.
Oh, Diane. She's always in my heart. When I was a hospice nurse, in those days there were no respite facilities. We went to the homes, and you cared for the family as well as the patient. Because I had had pediatric experience, I was elected to go to the homes of children that were considered to be terminally ill and dying. I met Diane. Diane was 9 years old. She had a brain tumor. And right away I knew that Diane was very mature for her age, spiritually mature. We had wonderful conversations every single day that I went there about God, she knew she was dying. She accepted that. And we talked about energy healing. We talked about the concepts of body, mind, spirit, emotion. It was as though I was talking with a very wise old soul. And she was actually teaching me. There was a poem called Teach Me to Die and I'll Teach You to Live. And she was really teaching me things about the dying process and how she wasn't afraid and how she believed in this spiritual realm that she would be going to. The thing that she was most, though, concerned about was that her grandmother was dying at the same time. And she did not want her mother to suffer the loss of her and her grandmother at the same time. So even though Diane was told that she would not live through Christmas, she did. She determined to. And she said that she made a deal with God that she would wait until after her grandmother had died and the funeral was completed so that it would be easier for her mother. She was like an angel on earth. Diane she will always be in my heart. And they took her to the hospital. She had a rough time right before Christmas, they took her to the hospital and they told us, her mother, her little brother, and myself, and her rest of her family, she would not make it home. She did. She arrived on Christmas Eve, and since I got the call that she would be coming home, I knew that it would make her happy if we had her house decorated for Christmas. I happened to be working in my office of hospice at the time, doing some paperwork, and the phone rang, and it was the local community college calling to see if anybody needed a Christmas tree. The girls at the college were going home, the roommates, and they had this decorated Christmas tree and candles in the window and everything you could want for a Christmas decoration. Did I know someone that could utilize that? I surely did. I also had a friend that had a truck. So we went to the college, we picked up everything. I got the key to Diane's apartment, which was on a second floor in a city, and got the key from her aunt because her mother was in Philadelphia with her in the hospital. We decorated the whole apartment. So when the medics carried Diane up the stairs to her apartment, the look on her face was priceless, priceless. And I actually have pictures of her. It was just wonderful. And Diane lived through Christmas, was able to enjoy Christmas. She lived through January and most of February. And on the last day of February, she died.
But that's not the last time you experienced Diane, right?
No. It so happened that I suddenly had a medical condition that required that I have surgery almost immediately. And I could not be there. I knew that Diane was dying. I could not be there when she was dying. It grieved me terribly because I had been with her for almost a year. And I loved this little girl. And why was it that I couldn't be there at her dying moment? I didn't understand that. So the other hospice nurses assured me that they would be there with her and her mother. So I went into the hospital, and right as I was being prepared for surgery, I had not received the medication yet, so I was fully awake. I was waiting for the anesthesiologist to come in, fully awake. I was very scared. I was very upset. I was told that I might have cancer, and suddenly I became very peaceful. All of a sudden there was a light that was just glimmering, shining, in a room where I was alone, and it was rather dark. It was like an anteroom to the surgical suite. And there was Diane. And she came to me, and she said, "Don't worry, Miss Jean. You will be fine. I'm with you." And I just immediately relaxed. I wanted to keep talking with her, but then she just was gone. This was a vision that was so real, and an audible voice that was so hers, that even though some people have tried to tell me this was a dream or this was, preoperative hallucination, no, it was very, very real. I went into the surgery feeling very calm. When I came out of the surgery, I was in the recovery room. I still, after all these years, feel it in my heart as an emotion of gratitude and love. Diane came to me again, and she said, "See, Miss Jean, you really are fine, and so am I. I love you, Miss Jean."
And when she came to you that time, that was not a visual appearance, but just auditory. Is that right?
Yes, that was auditory. Yes, I was had been waking up from the anesthesia. I was talking to the nurses. I think they were going to get me something to drink. And I heard her very, very clearly. And I didn't see her face this time, but I felt this same shimmering presence around me. And it was her voice.
Wow. So, working with dying people, what's the, when you're either in hospice or hospital setting, is there any doubt in your mind that there is something after death?
None. None. Not only have I witnessed people experiencing this, but I've actually experienced it myself. I have been with people who are dying, holding them in my arms as they were dying, and their face becoming translucent, and sometimes them talking to people in their lives that have died already. And they're saying, okay, okay. Maybe they were angelic beings calling for them. These dying patients that I had were so into the moment of transition that it showed not only on their face, I heard it in their voice, and they would often be reaching. And they would talk about the light. They would talk about beings that they could see. And my job was to help them to be peaceful as they went through that transition and crossed over into that light, into that place that they were seeing.
In general, is it so it's a fairly similar type of experience that people are dying when they're finally transitioning to death? It's a fairly similar experience that you've noticed in the sense of maybe experiencing other beings, other people that have passed before them. It just seems to be a kind of a consistency to it. Is that right?
Yes, yes. Sometimes it would happen in the hospital, but most often when I was a hospice nurse, it would happen in the home, because the idea of hospice was to keep the person at home and not to take them to the hospital. They wanted to die in their own bed, in their own home, with their family around. But when I utilized my hospice skills in hospital nursing, I often saw the same thing. And it would be sometimes the family around them that didn't want them to leave. Of course, they were grieving. They didn't want to lose their loved one. The loved one was ready to go. And as a hospice nurse, I knew that that was the time. And they needed to be allowed to let go. So I would often tell the family, he or she needs your permission. They need your permission to go. And while I was in a place to help the family, my first responsibility was to the patient, to allow that patient to know that it was okay for them to go. It was time. And of course, sometimes the family would not believe what the patient was experiencing, and I would help them as best I could to understand that that moment, that time that patient was reaching for the light or seeing someone that had died before was real to them. It was real to them, and that their passing was going to come very quickly. They just had to have permission from the family member. Because I think part of dying is you're already in that transitional mode, but if you're being pulled over here by someone who does not want to let go, it's difficult for that person. It makes it harder for them.
Let me ask you about another kind of, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, I apologize, but I just want to, another extraordinary experience you had is when you were in an apartment, you had dealt with some no heat being on, it wasn't a comfortable thing for you. And you experienced some what you called angelic-like beings. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yes. I was feeling displaced at the time. I had to quickly, for a number of reasons, quickly find a place to live. I was a hospice nurse at the time. I was rented a actual place in an established home where I had full use of the house. I had my own bedroom, and the owner of the house was away for periods of time. He was a long distance truck driver, and he had a son who stayed there and a girlfriend who also stayed there sometimes. But this particular night I was alone. There was a lot going on in my life. I was managing as best I could, but it was a difficult time. And the owner of the home had this lock over top of the thermostats. And the thermostat was set to come on the 15th of October. Well, it so happened this was like the first week of October, and it was very cold. It was just a cold snap. The house was very, very cold. There was no one else there but me. And I had to be up very early in the morning to go to my job as a hospice nurse. And I was really uncomfortable and very, very cold, shivering. And I could not do anything about the heat. I couldn't sleep. So I was laying in the bed, just putting on more covers. I was drinking tea. I was trying to get warm. Nothing was helping. It was like a chilliness down into my bones. And all of a sudden, I started seeing, the room was dark, I had the lights out, but all of a sudden I started seeing this, it was like a green mist, and it was just forming, and it kind of startled me. I didn't know what this was meaning. So I went to turn the light on, and the light blew. I went to turn another light on, it wasn't working. So I was a little scared. I got back into bed, covered myself again, and wondered what this was, because it was developing more and more and more, and with it was coming a warmth. And this green mist of light just circled my bed, and then it formed into 10 distinct beings. They were angelic beings. They were very tall. I can still see them. I was wide awake, and there was a warmth that was happening in the room. I knew, I didn't hear anything, so I knew that the heat didn't come on. The thermostat was locked, and these angelic beings were standing around my bed as though they were beaming warmth to me and light, and it was the most beautiful shade of green. I can still see it in my mind. And I became very calm, but I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I was feeling in my mind that I was being told to just receive, just relax and receive. So I did. And it just came that this warmth, this relaxation, and this confidence that this was going to be the beginning of a new part of my life. I didn't understand it. I was so, I don't even know the word. I was so astounded by this that there was nothing for me to do but just accept it and receive it. I wasn't afraid anymore. These were definitely beings of light. They were angelic. They were loving. They were beautiful. And they were warming me. And then as I got very warm and started to fall asleep, they started to dissipate. And the energy then just moved, just like it had come. It just moved away above my head, and it was gone. And I lay there for a few minutes thinking, what just happened? And And I literally, even though I was very tired and very comfortable and warm, I got up just to check that thermostat. It had not come on. And I decided that this was a gift, a spiritual gift, and I just went back to bed, went right to sleep. And the next day is when a lot of things started happening that took me to the next phase of my life, in which I felt comfortable and ready and happy and warm.
So there's no doubt in your mind that they physically appeared, that was a manifestation, that wasn't a dream of any kind.
Yes, I'm positive, because I was wide awake. I was very cold. I was shivering. I was not able to sleep. I was wide awake, and I was alone in the house, and when this first started happening, I was a little bit afraid. Didn't know what this was. And because of the way that this materialized and manifested into these beautiful beings that were translucent, and yet I could tell that they were angelic beings. And the feeling of relaxation, and the warmth was the biggest thing. I was never cold again. And that heat never did come on, and the weather never changed for another week or so. It was an amazing experience.
Tell me about your near-death experience.
Wow, that was an amazing thing. I had been very, very sick, and I was in the hospital for about 16 days. And I was very depressed, did not understand how I could be so sick, although I did gain understanding about that later on. And it was during the day. I was in a hospital room by myself, and there was no roommate next to me at the time. I was looking out the window and basically feeling sorry for myself. I was feeling a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, and just feeling like almost hopeless. Was I ever going to get well? And as I was processing all of this and trying to get myself out of this funk that I was in, I started all of a sudden to feel very weak and faint. And I started shaking. And I thought, I must be dying. I must be dying now. This is not the way I want to die. But I wasn't dying. I was literally lifting up. I could feel myself lifting up. I was still looking out the window, and I was seeing my body still in the bed, looking out the window, but I was lifting up. So I thought, well, I've heard of out-of-body experiences. I'm not sure what this is. But I went with it because I was feeling more comfortable. I was feeling lighter. And I kept rising up, and then suddenly, as I can clearly remember, I was in an upright position, standing up, but I was on it looked like a floor of light. And I was moving very quickly down this long hallway, and at the same time it felt like I was moving very slowly. It was a very strange feeling. I was comfortable. I was not having any pain. And the light around me and below me and above me was so bright. Yet in front of me, in the distance, there was a brilliant light that was kind of an oval shape, and it was moving, drawing me toward it. Like just moving, I'm saying this, I was going toward it. It was drawing me in. And then I noticed that it felt like I was in a huge grand ballroom. And there were people on either side. Rows and rows and rows and rows of people. A lot of whom I knew. There was my grandmother who had died. And my little baby nephew who died. she was holding him. My grandma died 3 weeks before my baby nephew died. He was 8 months old. And she was holding him. They were smiling. They were both smiling. This little infant baby was even smiling. And no one said anything, but all of these people, there were relatives, my other grandparents who had died long before, friends of my parents, my cousin who was 8 years old, who had died, or she was 8 years old when she died. She was there waving to me. Patients that I had that had died, hospice patients that had died, family, friends. I was just amazed. I was looking all around, and I could tell who they were. They were translucent. They had a shape, a form, like a body, but you could almost see through them, but I could tell who they were, because they were distinctly different, and yet they were all shining and glimmering. And I kept looking and looking to either side, and I was moving at a very fast pace, but yet I felt like I was really moving very slowly, so I could see everyone distinctly. And they were clapping, and they were just welcoming me, had their arms open, and I could feel such love. It was just an amazing feeling. I get choked up still now after all these years, still talking about it and remembering it. And there was one little lady in particular. She was waving a white handkerchief, and I recognized her right away. She was a patient that I had, not in hospice, but in the hospital when I was a student nurse. And she was waving this handkerchief that had embroidery all around it. And I instantly remembered her, because when I was a student, I took care of her. She was my patient. She was dying. We knew that. And she had embroidered this handkerchief for me as a gift. And of course, as a student, we were not allowed to receive any gifts at all from patients. So I tried to explain this to her, and she was very sad and very disappointed. She said, but I made it just for you. And I felt like I had to take it. So I accepted it. And as I did, as she was putting it into my hand, my instructor walked in and reminded me that we were not allowed to accept any gifts from patients. And I felt, as a student, I had to obey that. So I almost tearfully handed the handkerchief back to my patient. And I said to her, I'm so sorry. This is so lovely. I'm so sorry. You know, I can't be allowed to accept it. But I appreciate it so much. I will see you tomorrow. And she said to me, oh yes, we will see each other again. That night she died. I never did see her again until this moment. And she was reminding me, she was waving that handkerchief. It was just an incredible experience to see all of this, but the feeling was almost indescribable. I was moving toward this light, and I wanted so much to be enveloped in it. It was the Christ light. It was the God light. It was divine. It was welcoming. It was filled with love. There was just love everywhere, and tranquility and peace, and I just wanted to keep on going and going, and I could feel that I was so loved here. And as I got almost to the light, again, just gliding along, almost to that light, ready to just be totally enveloped in it, this very powerful, strong, clear, and yet gentle voice said, not now, Jean. Go back. Sean needs you. I was startled. The voice was so distinct and so clear, but so gentle and so loving. And I started moving back very rapidly away. I knew it was the voice of God, although I never heard the voice of God like that before, but I knew it was. I was confused. Why was I moving back? I wanted to go forward. Shoo! I was just moving back rapidly and rapidly. And the people that were on either side of this beautiful ballroom and hallway of light started to fade. And I saw myself coming down into the bed again. I was in the bed, but I saw my spirit coming down, floating down, entering my body. And when that happened, I was distraught. I did not understand this at all. I didn't want to be back in that body. Back was the pain, the misery, and complete confusion. I did have a son named Sean. He was 19. He was in college. He was fine. I did not understand the message. And I started crying. And right then, the nurse was asking me if I was in pain. Was my pain so badly I was crying? So bad was I crying? And I couldn't even speak to her. I don't even know if I nodded to her. It was just such a profound experience. I knew I couldn't share it with her. I knew I couldn't share it with anybody. I didn't understand it myself. And then I started questioning, was it real? Yes, it was real. It was real. And it took me a while to calm down. I never told anybody about it until I wrote my book. And it so happened that as I started to recover from this illness, I still didn't understand what it meant about my son Sean, but I thought, well, I know that I'm going to live through this illness because I have something to do. Sean needs me. I didn't know what. So although it's true that I did help Sean through some things, I taught him some things that he needed to know about visualization and affirmations and so on after college to get just the right job that he wanted and so on. It was 12 years later that I realized the real meaning of that message. My grandson was born 11 weeks or 12 weeks prematurely. And because his birth was so imminent, so early, they named him Sean. And he was so tiny and so fragile that I just knew that I was meant to help him. And so I did. And as I saw him for the very first time, this little tiny, immature baby, I just started singing this song that just came to my mind. I didn't know where the words came from. The melody came, the song came, and there I was standing there among doctors and nurses while they were showing my son and I this baby who had to go right into the incubator. I started singing this song. And then I knew that there was going to be a very special bond between my grandson and I. And I did a lot of healing energy with him. While I was there, putting my hands through the incubator, and while I was at home, when I couldn't visit him, I was always channeling healing to him. And I'm sure other people were. Prayers were being forwarded to him, and he has become a very healthy, wonderful, beautiful, kind, compassionate young man who is doing very well in college himself now.
That's awesome. It's a great story. So in your mind, your near-death experience was real. You're pretty sure in your mind that wasn't an hallucination, it wasn't a dream, it was a real experience.
It was very real. I have no doubt whatsoever. I have no doubt. I didn't have any expectation of that. I didn't have any thought of that. I didn't even think that I would be dying, except when I started to feel this dizzy, weak feeling. It was just at that moment that I thought, oh my God, am I dying here? It's not how I want to die. But I was already lifting up. Mm-hmm. So it was nothing that I had ever experienced before or since.
Did you feel any type of vibration or anything like that?
Yes.
Did you? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I did. I called it shaking at the time, but it was a vibration. And the vibration became higher and higher and higher. So when we are on this physical earth, we are in a more dense vibration. And as we grow spiritually, the vibration that we are having in our being, in our, not just our body, but our being, is getting more clear, more pure, higher degree of vibration. And that's the point, to remember that we are energy beings, that we are spiritual energy beings having a physical human experience. And I believe that we're here to remember who we are, truly, and be that authentic self, which is love. We were created from a divine essence that is love. We were given free will. So people say, well, if that's true, we were, created from divine love. We are part of that divine love. Why are there so many bad things that happen in the world? We were given choice. And the more dense we are, the farther away from the realization that we are spiritual beings, spiritual energy beings, the more dense the vibration, the more we will be mired in all this physical contrast, this physical dimension of duality, where there is none in spirit, soul world as I call it. There is no duality, there is no contrast. We chose to come here, I believe, to experience that contrast, and then to find our way back to remembering that we are wholly, W-H-O-L-L-Y, and H-O-L-Y in the spirit. We came here, I believe, and I have a lot more to learn, I'm sure, because I'm still here. From everything that I have learned and experienced so far, I believe that we chose to come here just to experience this contrast, this dimension, this duality, and maybe to challenge ourselves. I know I used to think that we were here to learn lessons. I've really evolved that belief into knowing or believing that we are here to remember, to make better choices, to make choices based on love, to make choices based on kindness and compassion and caring. I think that respecting all of life is critically important. And I feel that, as one person develops their own awareness of their spirituality, and I'm not talking religion, I'm talking spirituality, which can include religion, but not necessarily. That one person then, as they raise their vibration, will be able to vibrate out to others and help them to raise the vibration if they choose. Of course, they still have choice. And some people don't want to hear anything about this, and other people are gravitating toward it, like I did. I feel that my position now on Earth is to understand more about my authentic self and how to relate in this world with love, with compassion, and seeing the differences in people and accepting that everyone is on their path to remembering at different points.
So the whole idea of fear of death, should we fear death?
I do not fear death. I think people that do fear death, and I know a lot of people who do, especially when I was in my hospice work, fear death because they don't really know what to expect. They may think that this is the reality. This physical dimension is the reality. My belief is that this is the reality that we're experiencing now, but it's not our true reality. Our true reality is being a spiritual being having this human experience, which has a span of time. So time and space are constructs in this dimension of physicality. There is no time and space, really. So I had a dream one time that I was driving a car, and it was a convertible. It was a yellow convertible. And I was having a great time. I thought I was driving in the Southwest, like Sedona, Arizona. There were beautiful mountains, and all of a sudden, I drove right off the end of the world. Right off the end of the world, but I didn't fall. There was this endless space. And then there was this net of energy and these angelic beings that were all around. Now, this was a dream. And the car disappeared, and all of a sudden I was part of this endless universe. And it was beautiful. And I always remember that. It just went, no matter where I looked, up, down, to the side, behind, it was endless. And I thought, this is who I really, truly am. And back there, in the car, driving, was my human experience. And I woke up, so I was still here.
I totally agree. Totally believe that's right.
I do not fear death. I think a lot of people, more than fearing death even, could be fearing the dying process, because so many people suffer through the dying process. And they suffer because they're afraid, they're in pain, they are worried about their loved ones. And yet, everyone goes through the dying process, whether it's instant or whether it's elongated. We can imagine that because we're here for what actually is a brief time in eternity, a very brief time, we can imagine that we came from that place into this dimension. We're going back to that dimension of peace and love and unity and harmony and compassion and grace, with no effort, because it's like, in my view, it's like floating, going through a veil or going through a doorway into this glorious light. And not only did I experience it myself, but I had seen my patients reach for that. The people who are very afraid near their death, that was my job as hospice nurse, and I took it very seriously, to help them to become peaceful. Not by imposing any of my beliefs, but by helping them to identify what it is that they believe. And also, what is it that they feel they want to say or leave behind as an opportunity for someone else? Or forgiveness. Do they need to forgive themselves for anything? And I I feel like when I'm able to do that with patients, to help them to see their own truth, that they are spiritual beings and they're going to this beautiful place of light and truth and wisdom and peace and love and joy, that there's no reason to be afraid.